Please welcome to the stage Jay Collins of Citi and our esteemed panel.
Great. So let's go ahead and get started. We've got 20 minutes, and we've got quite a panel here today. I'm going to let everybody introduce themselves, but just to tee this up, we're going to talk to you a little bit about COP28 and the agenda going into COP28. And interestingly, as we prepared for this, we've got such different prisms, different responsibilities, but all expertise in pretty much everything that we'll be seeing at COP. I think we've got the UAE represented, obviously the host, and could not ask for two better global large technology companies that are leaning into the environment, both Microsoft and Salesforce. And I represent Citi. I'll start by introducing myself. I'm a vice chairman of banking at Citi. I've covered sustainability for 30 years of my career and had the honor of being the senior for Citi as in our advisory mandate of climate finance for COP27 in Egypt last year. Tim?
Tim Christophersen, vice president for climate action at Salesforce.
I'm Maitha Al Hameli. I'm the unit head at the Marine Assessment and Conservation Team in the Environment Agency at Abu Dhabi.
And I'm Melanie Nakagawa, the Chief Sustainability Officer at Microsoft.
Great. So I think, Maitha, maybe we'll start off with you. Obviously, biodiversity, nature, adaptation are all critical themes of the COP28 agenda this year. And you're doing at EAD quite a bit of work in the preparation for this. So maybe you could tell us a little bit what your priorities are, where you're seeing progress, and what the objectives are.
So thank you, Jay. I'd just like to start by saying I'm really pleased to be part of this panel with these amazing leaders. So I myself have been working conservation for 14 years, and I do understand the importance of habitat and environment, the marine environment, when it comes to COP and climate change. And in the Environment Agency at Abu Dhabi, we are so proud that we've been working on this. This is not recent work. We've been working on this for over 25 years now. And we've been monitoring the marine ecosystem for a very long time with the long-standing projects. And a lot of our programs do not just touch base on habitats, but we look at species, habitats, and a holistic approach when it comes to research. And because of this long-standing program, we've managed to understand the urgency needed to move quickly, especially with the climate change and everything that's happening with the climate change. And we are working closely on looking at corals. This is one of the most sensitive habitats when it comes to climate change. As you're well aware, I think this year we've had a huge heat wave across the world, which affected a lot of the corals. And because of that, we've already 2 years ago started a very ambitious coral restoration program, where we're aiming to restore over 1 million coral fragments across reefs in Abu Dhabi. And as we speak, the team is out there scouting Abu Dhabi waters for the most resilient corals that have survived the heat wave that has hit the world this year, and making sure that these corals are tagged, well known, studied, and understood, not just for our sake, but for the world's sake. And we believe a lot in science in the Environment Agency, and we work closely with researchers and scientists, and that's why we recently have set voyage in our research vessel across the Gulf that works on looking at not only the fish stock, but we are also looking closely at habitats, wildlife, and also we have 2 important labs on that vessel that look at climate change, where we have an air quality lab and a water quality lab that will help us understand the bigger picture when it comes to climate change and the effects of climate change on the bigger marine biome. And that being said, and talking about COP and climate change, We believe that Abu Dhabi is a living lab when it comes to climate change, and this living lab is somewhere that we would like to invite all researchers, scientists, and also policymakers and financiers like yourself to come and visit and look at firsthand, understand the effects of climate change when it comes to the marine biome and the overall ecosystem.
Fantastic. So we'll come back and dig deeper a little bit on that. But maybe, Melanie, I could turn it over to you and get a Microsoft perspective on how you're thinking about
Well, you
that.
got a great, she mentioned so many great examples around, you have these vessels and you have these monitors on it. And you think about the role technology plays to actually scale that even further. If you can get not only your vessels, but all the other vessels that are on the water and gather that data and those insights that are coming off of that, imagine all the insights we can draw from all of that data. And that's an area where, Microsoft, we're a technology company, we're building products, we're building technology solutions that leverage AI and large language models to just be able to scale the impact of AI's work around sustainability. And for my role as Chief Sustainability Officer, it really is about how do you harness some of these tools, how do you work with partners from other companies, from nonprofits, from the academic world, and harness their know-how to bring all of that to bear to really scale the solutions we need to address this critical crisis of climate change. And for Microsoft, really, the starting process for that change starts at home. Microsoft set really ambitious commitments back in 2020 to be carbon negative, water positive, and a zero waste company, all by 2030, a timely date, as many of us are here gathered in New York for the SDG Summit as well, which has a 2030 target timeline as well. And so as part of our commitments, we know we have to work really hard internally as a company, but then also in 2020, we realized it has to expand beyond our four walls. Us as a company alone achieving our goals is not enough to actually make the changes that are needed. So to expand beyond our four walls, we also launched a $1 billion climate innovation fund to invest in really insightful innovations at technology companies that get us access to these types of insights, whether it's conservation, biodiversity, water, energy storage. And one thing just to mention, tagging off of what you teed up on, if you think about the things we could do with technology, not only can you learn more about the ocean ecosystem, you can also track migratory patterns of large mammals in the water or animals on land like giraffes and elephants, and really understand the role that we play with the environment, our relationship with the environment, and then take that insight to really think about conservation and protection. And so these are just areas where Microsoft has been looking at partners and joining with partners, whether it's Planet Labs, the Nature Conservancy, and other organizations, to really scale this technology so that we can actually see progress at a much more accelerated rate as we go into this year's COP, but even beyond. And it's beyond just our commitments. It's really about the partnerships that we work with and working with global players.
Fantastic. Tim, maybe I turn to you on Salesforce.
Thank you, Jay. Salesforce has sustainability as a core value since 2021. So like other leading companies, we invest a lot in both nature-based solutions, but also in carbon dioxide removal, other technologies. We've made a $100 million commitment under the First Movers Coalition to innovate technologies, but we also have a $100 million ecosystem restoration climate justice fund. We invest heavily in nature-based solution carbon credits. I want to share an observation with you, though, that I've made here at New York Climate Week. We're on a lot of these panels with the private sector, and we speak about all the things we do and how useful that is. It is very useful because somebody needs to lead and pioneer, but if you look at the 2,000 largest companies in the world, only 1/3 have some kind of climate target. So first of all, where is everybody? Secondly, if you want to accelerate action with the speed that science tells us we now need on the climate, voluntary action is no longer enough, because we will miss the 1.5 degree target if we don't move the entire field of the private sector and the public sector into more climate action. So Salesforce also advocates for mandatory climate disclosure, mandatory nature reporting for all large companies worldwide. We're helping with our technology for companies to enter that space and do that cost effectively. But I think it's essential that we don't rely on voluntary action alone, because we're always the same group of companies that sit on these panels. And There are many, many more companies out there, as you well know. So we need everybody. And what gives me hope at this Climate Week is that if you see climate action as a team sport, just until recently, few people knew the rules. Then we were not coordinated. Some people were playing against their own team. That is all changing now. We're more coordinated. Everybody knows what the goal is. We have to play together, public sector, government, private sector, civil society, and then we can reach the 1.5 degree goal. And that is starting to align. That coordination is now coming.
Fantastic. So let me add a little bit of a climate finance objective, or some of the things that we at Citi are seeing in the government space and in the preparation for COP28. First of all, many of you may know that this is the year of the stocktake, the global stocktake, and that's really two parts. Three parts actually, starting with data, near to the heart of my friends to my right. And that's been really a review of, say, 1,600 technical documents. And then what was just done and released recently is the technical report that reviews and says where are we technically on science. And quite frankly, there's not a lot of surprises in that. It does say that we are on track for 2.4 to 2.6 degrees Celsius, well off mark. But generally, the review of the synthesis report is, in fact, that a synthesis of what everyone has said and is setting. What is important at COP28, though, is the third step of that, which is the political level. And at the political level, that will actually happen during the negotiations at COP28, there will be political conclusions of that stocktake. And that's going to be critical because it will drive the pace of the political consensus in and around a whole variety of actions. And what's happening today with the Secretary General and his ambition agenda and his acceleration agenda is really a sense that it all needs to be both greater ambition and increased acceleration. And that's not just over the past several years, but that's even looking at the Macron Summit, the G20 that we just finished, the Nairobi Declaration, everything, and the negotiations that happen in Bonn and elsewhere leading into today in this Climate Week is just we're not moving far enough, fast enough. And importantly, what you should be looking at as you look at this stocktake is the mandates that will then be given for 2025 when the ambition of countries is redrafted and recreated. Those are the NDCs. Another important thing that I think we should all be watching and that isn't talked about so much in the public domain, and remember there's really two parts of the COP process every year. So you have the negotiating track, you have the official UNFCCC process where the negotiators are meeting around the clock on their tracks and trying to reach consensus, UN consensus on outcomes. There's also the broad-based non-official tracks of discussions and negotiations, and generally an attempt every COP, but particularly in this one, to increase ambition of all of those non-official actors in what the private sector can do, what NGOs can do, what everyone can do to be more ambitious. But importantly, really since COP27, is that increase in operationalizing those commitments, in taking the words and putting them into actions and trying to step up both the pace but the implementation, the concrete steps. And that's not just true of the finance space, it's true of everything. And three, partnerships. So you'll see the theme that COP28 is talking an awful lot about is who's showing up with new, bold, ambitious partnerships in all of the thematic days. And that'll happen in parallel to, probably as important as the official track is, all of those things. They tend to be what an American would call singles in baseball terms, right? They're just one after another, and you've just got to have a lot of them. But in the official space, just 2 or 3 things I'd mention before we turn back to other members of the panel is, Copenhagen promised that the developed world would deliver $100 billion to the developing world, and that has yet to be delivered. And most, if not all, leaders are saying expectations are high for that to happen. But there's some other things on the table that we're perhaps less optimistic about. And one of those is the agreement for a loss and damage fund to be funded and implemented by COP28 that was announced at COP27. And interestingly there, the Secretary General has called out the lack of ambition and progress so far on that. That's really important because the developing world has that as one of its highest expectations, is a loss and damage fund will be created. And that is really yet to be the decision on governance, the decision on who funds it, the decision on who receives it and how they receive it. There's all kinds of things that have yet to be decided. And on top of that, the Copenhagen 100 is coming to an end, despite the fact that it hasn't been fulfilled. There is the new collective quantified goal that the developed world will pay to the developing world. And we're expecting to have a full methodologies and agreement by next year, not this COP, but the following one. And again, we have not had the ambition and the progress that we need to have to set even the framework in and around that. So as we look at the Global South challenges, one of the biggest issues in the room of COP will be, what is the Global North, what is the West really doing to ensure that when the Global South shows up in the UAE, that they have been given the measures that they're looking forward to and that meet some of those expectations. And as of now, we're falling short. So let me just turn around, and I think we should go through maybe a quick another round. And probably the best thing to do, and Melanie, maybe I'll start with you, is if you had to say something that's really either a Microsoft objective or something that you're most hopeful for to come out of COP28 that you may contribute to or see on your lens, what would that be?
I think for me and for Microsoft, one thing that we're really excited about, and to pick up on several sports analogies that have already been laid on the table today, is really how do corporates come together and actually accelerate our momentum. A lot of the conversations we're having is we are all up here on stage talking about the progress we're making as our own corporations. And something that we've done, and I'm sure others have done as well, we produced several white papers and policy briefs, electricity, on energy, on carbon removal, and they really are the playbook. It's like if an athlete were to publish exactly what's his diet and regimen, what the shoes that they're wearing, what kind of vitamins have they taken, what did they eat before the race. It's really the playbook of how to beat the next Olympian. And I think part of what we're trying to do is make sure that everybody has the same understanding of what it takes to excel in carbon markets, in carbon removal, in water replenishment. And really, it's that type of collective mobilization that's really going to be important. And so we've already started doing our part of showing 3 years into the journey of sustainability, what has Microsoft learned, what have been our hardships, what have been the challenges, and then been having these really robust conversations in actually closed door sessions and open door sessions this week, really sharing, kind of the hard talk of what it takes to actually lead, and what does it take to actually make these bold, ambitious commitments? How do you bring your team on board? How do you build teams to do that and execute? And so that's what I'm excited about for COP28, is to really take from this moment today forward and show up in COP and say, well, in the last few months, how much further did you go? What more kind of skills or tools do you need to do that? And how do we partner with you to get it done?
Tim, 30 seconds. COP28.
I want to make one plug for nature in the global stocktake. Launched a campaign earlier this week to include nature in the global stocktake, because remember, nature gives you a double dividend for resilience and for mitigation. And we're supporting the mangrove breakthrough, for example, at COP28, effort to conserve and restore an additional 15 million hectares of mangroves, $4 billion that we will collectively raise with governments and the private sector. Because remember that saving the planet is a huge business opportunity, maybe akin to AI as a business opportunity. And there will be a multi-billion-dollar nature repair and restoration market that we need to kickstart. And that's why these initial investments are so essential to have that multi-billion-dollar market established.
Fantastic, Maitha.
I'll just maybe bounce off Tim and say natural-based solutions is one of the most important things that we need to look at when it comes to combating climate change, and what Tim is talking about, and escalating the financing of these projects is key. And I think by COP28 we should stop looking at biodiversity alone and climate change alone and start looking at them as one unit, because without biodiversity we will not be able to combat climate change. And without biodiversity, climate change is inevitable.
Fantastic. I will end by saying at Citi we're committed to the climate finance agenda and the transition of our clients. And at the end of the day, all of this ambition has to translate into funding. And these challenges are enormously complex. So this week, the leaders of the world are spending a good amount of their time locked in a room trying to solve very specific funding fund problems, how to crowd in the private sector from the multilateral development banks, how to mitigate FX risk, how to basically drive massive amounts of money into the climate agenda that will support the ambition of the world in COP28. So let me thank all of us. I think we had a lot of fun and hope you enjoyed it as well. Thank you.